How's that? All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's going to be a wonderful evening here tonight. What a great crowd. So I'm Lloyd Smucker, and it's an honor of mine to represent this area, Pennsylvania 11th District, which includes Lancaster County and some of York County. How many of you are ready to elect Donald J. Trump as President of the United States in just 12 days? So I have a number for you, 958. Anybody know what that is? That is the additional cost for every Pennsylvania family due to the policies of this administration per month. Per month. At minimum is right. How many of you can afford 4 more years of the Harris-Biden policies? I don't see one hand in this place. We have 12 days, folks, November 5th. And in fact, you don't even need to wait for November 5th. You can vote now. Early voting is going on. How many of you voted so far? Yes! That's a lot of people. And there's a lot of people who haven't, and you can go vote. Go to swampthevote.com. Take that down, swampthevote.com. It'll tell you where you can vote. And if you're in Lancaster County, you can even vote on Saturday. They're opening up the courthouse between 8 and 12 on Saturday, so you can vote early. I do have an announcement. So this will be a special fireside chat this evening. Take out your phones. This will be a part of a TV special on Dr. Phil's new television network, Dr. Phil's Merit TV. So you're going to be on TV. And if you want to watch it, when it airs next week, you can text 59627. Again, text 59627. You'll get an auto message with a link on all the different ways to watch. Y'all get that? 59627, and you'll be part of the show next week. So I already mentioned Harris's economic policies that have caused the horrific inflation that we've seen. We've also seen what's happening at the border, Kamala's actions or lack of actions at the border. We're seeing we're in the worst place in the world, the worst security in the world since World War II. As a result of the weakness of this administration, we need a change. The American people are worried, they're anxious, and in fact, it's not just economics. The American people's health is declining as well. As I said, people are worried and anxious. We're seeing a rise in anxiety, in depression, even in suicides are skyrocketing. We're seeing the American people, again, worried about their future, and that's why I'm so excited that in addition to Trump's policies of making America great again, we're going to make America great again? He's also prioritized making America healthy again. You know, it wasn't long ago that we led the world in the health of our people, in how long we lived, but that has changed. We now are sicker, and we live less long than many other nations around the world. You're seeing chronic disease on the rise. About 40 million people in America today have diabetes. Almost half of Americans are obese. We're a sick nation, folks. It's time that we focus on making America healthy again. And by the way, the president accomplished a lot when he was the 45th president. He prioritized research and development. He passed the Right to Try Act, which gave terminally ill patients the access to life-changing illness, life-saving illness. But we can do so much more. And what the president has said he will do is work with people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and who's going to work alongside Dr. Phil and Calley Means and many other experts, top-rated experts in the country and around the world, to put us on a better trajectory, on a better, healthy path. So now it's my job to welcome someone to the stage who you all know, one of the premier mental health experts in the world, who has helped more Americans than any living psychologist. Would you please welcome with me Dr. Phil?
Well, good evening. You guys look just like you do when I'm on TV. And you are going to be on TV, by the way. You're going to be on Dr. Phil's Merit TV. So if you're with somebody you shouldn't be with, now's a good time to move. Really good time to move. Thank you so much for being here. This is an important night, and we're talking about important things, and that's why I came here tonight. I don't want to waste more time, so I want to introduce the rest of this evening's panel. And I was asked by my good friend, RFK Jr. Bobby asked me to join him and to moderate this very important roundtable, Make America Healthy Again. And let me tell you, you're going to hear some things tonight that are going to shock you, it's going to upset you, and it's going to motivate you to not just get out and vote, but to get 5 other people to go with you to vote. And that's what we want to happen. You will not find an American family that is not touched by what we're going to say tonight in some way, whether it's your parents or your grandparents or your children that are pregnant, that are going to have children. This touches everybody. It's touched my family. It's touched my children. I have 4 grandchildren. All of them are touched in some way by this. It's incredibly personal to Bobby. He's been very bravely open about his battle with a heroin addiction for 14 years. And he is now fighting to end the addiction crisis in America. And God bless him for being open about that. There's an addiction crisis in America. I covered this topic heavily in my new book, We've Got Issues. Overdose deaths in this country are going through the roof. Since 1999, the number has quintupled. Think about that. And it is still rising. In 2022, the last year for which we have complete data, the record on overdose deaths in this country topped 105,000. Now think about that. According to the National Institutes of Health, it's over 300 people a day. That's the equivalent of a jumbo jet going down every day. Now you can bet if we had a jumbo jet crashing in this country every day, it would be headline news. We would be all over the airline industry, would we not? But somehow or another, it just seems to slide by. But it's not going to slide by anymore because Bobby Kennedy's going to make sure it does not. Also, you know my good friend Calley Means. He is the co-founder of Truemed and co-author with his sister, Dr. Calley Means, of the #1 New York Times bestseller, Good Energy, The Surprising Connection Between Metabolism and Limitless Health. Now, earlier in his career, he was consultant for food and pharma companies and is now exposing their practices. Don't you love it when you got an insider? They have weaponized these institutions of trust, and he has appeared on outlets such as Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, Fox News, and Dr. Phil. Please welcome RFK Jr. and Calley Means. Does it matter? I expect it doesn't. No, actually, I think it does. I think you're supposed to be down here. They got our mics on the sides where we're supposed to be looking. All right. I love hanging out with smart people. It makes me look, hopefully, smarter. Okay, gentlemen, thank you guys so much for letting me be part of this.
Thank you for being here, Phil.
Well, we've talked about these things before, and I get really
I called
fired
Phil
up.
about 2 days ago and said, will you come and do this? So I'm very, very grateful for you changing your...
Well, I get fired up about this when you start talking about it, and I've talked with both of these gentlemen about this, and I get fired up. And let me start with you, Bobby. You've spoken at length about the need to make America healthy again. What does it mean to make America healthy again, and what does this encompass? What has to happen?
Well, I like the way that you began. The congressman talked about how we were, when I was a kid, we were the healthiest country in the world. We had the most revered healthcare system. We had the greatest scientific agencies. NIH was the gold standard research agency in the world. And in fact, there's a lot of countries, that in the early 1960s, these new countries that were colonial countries particularly in Africa and some parts of Asia, they didn't have the money to have a research agency of their own, and in their constitutions, they put whatever NIH says or whatever FDA says will apply in our country. So everybody was looking to the United States for gold standard scientific research, and we had the gold standard healthcare. You've seen these pictures of the Presidential Council on Physical Fitness, which my uncle started, where these kids in high school, they all look healthy, they all look like athletes, the athletes of today. But these were just average high school students. We had the longest lifespan of any country in the world, and we had the greatest healthcare system. Today, we have the worst healthcare. We have the most expensive. We pay 2 to 3 times what people pay in European countries. We pay almost 5 times what Italians pay, and they have a lifespan 7 years longer than us. Our lifespan has dropped comparative to Europe by almost 6 years since 1970. So we are losing every year. We're losing IQ. And that has never happened before. Our IQ, there's something called the Flynn effect. Our IQ in this country has increased every decade since 1900. And for the first time, IQ in our kids are dropping. College entrance exam scores are dropping, particularly among males, which are more susceptible to certain kinds of brain injury. And we're seeing male performance in schools drop way behind females, including in areas that were traditionally dominated by boys, which is math and sciences. They're dropping behind girls on in those issues. We're seeing, as you pointed out, a mental health crisis. 40% of American teenagers are diagnosed with depression. This is not normal. We've had an increase in chronic disease. And what do I mean by chronic disease? I mean basically 3 categories. One is neurological diseases like ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, tics, Tourette syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, autism. These are words that I didn't know as a kid. I never knew anybody with these diseases. I had 11 siblings. I had about 70 first cousins, and I didn't know anybody who had any of these diseases. Autism in my age group, 70-year-old men, is still today about 1 in, depending on what study you read, 1 in 1,500 to 1 in 10,000. In my children's generation, it's 1 in every 34 kids, 1 in every 22 boys. And nobody's asking, why is this happening? This is a whole generation that's being wiped out. The other category is autoimmune diseases, which is rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Crohn's disease, all of these exotic diseases that we never heard of. And suddenly they're in every classroom. Diabetes, when I was a kid, the average pediatrician saw 1 case of diabetes over a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 children who walk through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. That's not normal. Other nations don't have anything like that. And then allergic disease has also exploded. These are peanut allergies, food allergies, eczema. I never heard of eczema when I was a kid. Today in every classroom, I never heard of a peanut allergy. I knew nobody who had a peanut allergy. Why do 5 of my 7 kids have food allergies? This isn't normal.
Well, Bobby, take a breath for a minute. You're breathing through your ears. You got to take a breath. Calley, let me ask you something. Think about this. The trajectory you just described, because in our generation, these things didn't exist, and now they're on the rise. Where does this go if it continues? If it continues on this trajectory, where are we going to be in 1 or 2 more generations? And Calley, why is this happening? Are we not absolutely poisoning the children that are coming up through these generations today? This isn't coming out of nowhere. We're actually poisoning these children.
Can we please get a round of applause for Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump for putting these big ideas on the national platform? This is not partisan. There's not a partisan word coming out of Bobby's mouth or President Trump's mouth when they talk about this issue. The great realignment happening in American politics right now with Bobby and Elon Musk and Tulsi Gabbard putting everything on the line right now for President Trump is that it is no longer partisan. It is American people versus a uniparty that has co-opted our military and made us less safe, that's co-opted our education systems, made us less smart, and co-opted our health and is making us less healthy. To answer your question, we are sitting on the verge of a societally destabilizing health collapse in this country. When we have 30% of young adults having prediabetes, when 50% of young adults are overweight or obese, and it's 3% in Japan, we have something morally wrong happening. The math is clear. The largest industry in the United States is not AI, it's not tech, it's healthcare, and it's also the fastest growing, producing sicker, more depressed, more infertile Americans for every extra dollar we spend. It will be 40% of GDP if Kamala Harris gets 2 terms by the end of her term. The status quo is unsustainable and will lead us to a population collapse. Why is this happening? What's so powerful about Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump, what they have put their finger on, is that this is not a health policy issue. It is a corruption issue. Bobby mentioned the Italians. The American people are not lazier than Italians, but we are living 6 years less. We are committing suicide at a much higher rate. We are far less infertile. There's something happening, not with the people in this room. I know everyone in this room wants to be healthy. Everyone in the room wants their kids to be healthy. But you're being told by a corrupt medical system that you want to be sick. That's a lie. The reason this is happening is because the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry, just as a statement of economic fact, is the largest funder of politicians in America. They're the largest funder of media in America. They're the largest funder of academic research in America. They are the largest funder of medical organizations, which set the standards of care. They are the largest funder of every single institution of trust that impacts our health. And they've co-opted those institutions to where the NIH has had 8,000 conflicts of interest in the last couple of years. Just this week, the NIH did a $10 million study on whether puberty blockers for kids was a good thing or a bad thing. The results, it just leaked today, were that it's not such a good thing, and the NIH hid those results. They hid those results because they said it would be bad to get those results out, bad to get that science out.
Now, I have to add something in here because when you're talking about they're the biggest funders, that means they're buying the results. It means they're buying the results. And something else that we need to add to it, it's not just the physical health. Right now, in 2009 and 2010, we had the highest levels of anxiety, depression, and loneliness among our young people since records were being kept. And think about the fact that all of the young people that are involved in that and the people that keep those records, the agencies that keep those records, are the same agencies that made the decision to shut down the schools when we got into COVID. Now, what does that mean? That means they knew that the kids were in the biggest mental health crisis since they've been keeping records. They know that the school system, where they have the interaction, where they have all the social development, where they have the mandated reporters who watch to see kids that are being molested or abused, those are the eyeballs on those kids. They shut down those schools and kept them shut down for so long without any plan to open them back up. And what we saw were the referrals for sexual molestation and abuse nationwide dropped as much as 40 to 50%. And those kids began to have educational gaps, social gaps, and increases even higher in depression, anxiety, and loneliness. And when you ask them why they would pull that down when they knew that that virus was not life-threatening to those children, they said, well, we did the best we could with what we knew at the time. No, they did not. They did not do the best they could with what they had at the time. And what Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump are doing is saying we're going to have transparency with these agencies to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. Bobby, go ahead.
I would add to that just to tell you, one of a really typical way that CDC handles this kind of bad news. CDC, lists childhood milestones, and the childhood milestones until last year said that an American child by the age of 12 months should be able to walk. That by 18 months, a child should have 50 words. Well, what we saw during the lockdowns particularly was a huge drop in IQ. A Brown University study showed a 22-point drop in IQ among American children during the lockdown, 22 American toddlers during the lockdown. And CDC changed about 1 year ago, CDC changed the childhood milestones so that now a child is expected to walk at 18 months and to have 50 words by 2 years. So what they're doing is they're normalizing the dumbing down of American children by telling us, oh, this is normal, don't worry about it. That's what they've been doing with autism for years. They've been trying to convince us, oh, we're just seeing it for the first time. And this is a lie. If you were seeing it for the first time, why aren't you seeing it in 70-year-old men? Why are you only seeing it in kids who are under 35? And CDC hides those things from us to show us, to conceal from us. As Calley just said, when they get bad news, they bury it. They bury their failure to protect our kids. During COVID, we had the highest death rate of any country in the world. In this country, we had 16% of the COVID deaths. We only have 4.2% of the global population. Why are we giving awards to people who manage COVID? They have the worst record of any nation in the world by far. And why? And when you ask CDC, why did we do so badly on COVID compared to the rest of the world? They say, well, it's not our fault. It's because Americans are so sick. Because according to CDC, the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. COVID wasn't killing healthy children. They can't find a single healthy kid who died from COVID. COVID was killing people who had chronic disease, and we have the highest chronic disease burden of any nation in the world, and that's why we were dying from COVID. So the chronic disease is life-threatening to us, and people worry about the next pandemic. Well, the next pandemic is going to affect us if we're sick. We got to get Americans healthy again.
Well, Bobby,
and that's
you
what
say-
Donald Trump wants to do.
Bobby, you say that, you say 2 generations ago America was the healthiest country in the world, but now chronic disease is an epidemic costing the economy $4 trillion a year, dwarfing even the defense budget.
It's $4.3 trillion. It's 5 times the defense budget. When my uncle was president, 6% of Americans had chronic disease, and we spent zero on chronic disease in this country. Today, probably around 60%. We don't know the exact number because NIH stopped publishing that number in 2006. But by 2006, it had raised to 54%. It's almost certainly 60% today. And it's costing us 5 times our military budget. As Calley has said, this is existential. This is what's going to kill our country. It's chronic disease. If you're healthy, our nation is going to face all kinds of crises in the next 2 decades. And they could be economic, it could be war, it could be terror attacks, it could be anything. But we're a resilient country. We have tremendous strength. We have innovative capacity like none other in the world. We have a kind of freedom in this country that other people don't have that gives us that resilience. But if you've got a sick child, or if you have a chronic disease and you're dependent every day in your life of pharmaceutical interventions, it is crushing. And it's crushing our economy, it's crushing us morally, it's crushing our optimism and our hope for the future. In 2013, Gallup did a poll of Americans under 35 years of age, between 18 and 35, and asked Americans, young people, are you proud of the United States of America? 80% said yes. The same poll taken 8 months ago, only 18% said yes. Because people have lost their pride in our country because they've lost faith in their own futures.
Well, Calley, how do we go from trace levels to 60% with chronic diseases? How do we go from such low levels to getting to such high levels that it's eating up the budget and tearing down the society? How do we go from, in particularly, such a short period of time?
It's the broken paradigm of chronic disease management that we can change very, very quickly. Right now, 90% of our healthcare budget and 9 out of 10 killers of Americans and the conditions that are plaguing, I'm surely many people in this room and many kids, are chronic lifestyle conditions. That's what's plaguing America, right? Diabetes, dementia, Alzheimer's, heart disease, cancer, etc. These things are all exploding right now. And right now, when you are feeling a little sad, you get an SSRI. When you're feeling your tired's a little fidgety, they get the Adderall, which is 1 molecule away from crystal meth. When you have a little bit high blood sugar, you get the metformin, 100 million prescriptions a year. When you're a little bit high cholesterol, you get the statin. My mom was on all those drugs. That's the average American. Many people here are on those. But that standard of care is a lie. The foundational premise of chronic disease is that these things are all connected. And that's not a lecture, and President Trump and Bobby Kennedy aren't lecturing the American people, but it's corruption because that is the clinical reality that depression is not an SSRI deficiency and diabetes is not a metformin deficiency. There's a multifaceted attack on our metabolic health, whether that's the proliferation of pharmaceuticals, whether that's the fact that we let the tobacco industry buy our food industry in the 1990s and create the food pyramid and put 10,000 chemicals in our food that aren't legal in other countries and weaponize our food with seed oils and added sugar and highly processed grains, whether that's the fact that schools put kids in a windowless room, sedentary, to where kids are so sedentary today that 77% of military-age men aren't eligible from a physical fitness standpoint to join the military. The fact that there is an absolute unrelenting war on our child and our chronic stress, with our phones and from technology companies. And I always say this, and Bobby says this, there's nothing more profitable than a child's dopamine. There's nothing more profitable than getting them addicted to ultra-processed food, than getting them addicted to soda, which we subsidize with food stamps, than getting addicted to their phones, than getting them sedentary. So the fact of the matter is we've lost our way. We've let this institution, the food industry, which through just basic economics wants food addictive and cheap, we've let them take over our USDA, and we've let an industry that profits from Americans being sick take over our health authorities. This can change very quickly, and it's not about lecturing. The last thing I'll just say real quick, and I want to address this. The media somewhere around here, they're doing snarky articles about President Trump's commitment saying he went to McDonald's. Let me be clear. I'm sure a lot of people here go to McDonald's. The question is, why is the food at McDonald's different than it is in other countries? Why do we allow poison American companies to completely reformulate their ingredients? People should be able to go to McDonald's without poisoning their kids. People should be able to trust our food industry. This is about corruption, and it is about changing the standard of care so that when your kid is depressed or your kid has anxiety or ADHD or what have you, they're getting the correct clinical guidelines, which often is not a drug, right? That's what it's all about.
Bobby, something you taught me when you and I were talking previously, and this is, they don't even call it corruption. It's so normalized now. This is something you taught me earlier, that when drugs get approved by the FDA or different agencies along the way, but by the FDA, you say whoever approves those drugs actually gets paid for life for approving those drugs?
We're conflating two
straighten it out
kinds
for me.
of corruption. One is when FDA approves a food or a drug, there's panels that do that. They're outside panels. They're not FDA employees. The same with CDC. When it recommends vaccines, it has a panel that it assembles of so-called experts. As it turns out, the experts on those committees, almost all of them, have conflicts of interest, so that they're making money from the companies whose products they're approving. And we're going to end that when we get into office.
But now, wait a minute. Let's break that.
That's one conflict.
Break that down for a minute. They're making money for what they're approving.
Yeah, they're making money. For example, and Calley can talk specifically about the individuals who are on the FDA committee that approves new foods and the USDA committee that creates the food pyramid. Those are people from the food industries, and they're professors who are developing products and chemicals that they will profit from by selling them to the food industry. There's another conflict, which is that NIH in 1980, NIH when I was a kid was 15 minutes from my home, and I wanted to be a scientist when I grew up. And I would go to NIH and look through the microscopes. I had a friend who was a scientist there, and I loved going to NIH. And it was, like I said, the gold standard medical or scientific research, biomedical research agency on Earth. In 1980, Congress passed a law, and Ronald Reagan signed it, called the Bayh-Dole Act. And that act said that scientists who worked for NIH, who developed new drugs, would keep royalties from those drugs if those drugs made it to the market. Plus, NIH itself could keep up to 50% of the royalties on drugs that it developed. And I think it quickly became the primary preoccupation of NIH. So it stopped doing the kind of medical research designed to make us better. And it focused instead on the research to develop new drugs that would bring money into the agency. And I think, although I'm not sure of this data, and I don't use data usually that I'm completely unsure, but this is, let me say, this is true at some rate, although I may get the date right, but wrong. But I think it was 2016, There were 220 new drugs approved by FDA, and every one of them came out of NIH. So NIH has become the incubator for new pharmaceutical products. And I'll give you an example. The Moderna vaccine, which was pushed heavily by the government, and we were mandated to take that or one of the other products, but depending on a region, that may have been your only choice. That product was developed in-house at NIH. There are 6 scientists at NIH who will collect $150,000 forever, not just for their lives, but as long as mRNA products are on the market, they and their heirs will collect money. So they're paying for their mortgages, they're paying for their boats, they're paying for their children's education, they're paying their alimony payments based upon if that drug sells in the marketplace. Plus, NIH itself owns 50% of the Moderna vaccine, so it will collect tens of billions of dollars from sales of that vaccine. So these are the regulators that we pay through taxpayer money to find problems with those products, to make sure that they're safe. But of course, if you're paying all of your bills with that product, you have a huge incentive to overlook those problems. And that mercantile impulse in any system will quickly overcome and subsume the regulatory function.
I'm sorry, that's just a conflict of interest. I don't care how you paint it, that's just a conflict of interest. Calley, am I wrong?
Dr. Phil, it seems like it's surprising you. I think it's surprising everyone in this room. There are not conflict of interest rules today among FDA advisory committees that are approving drugs. 19 out of the 20 experts who are on the USDA Nutrition Guideline Committee that set the standards for your children are paid for by food and or pharma companies. Today, the USDA says that added sugar can be a healthy part of a 2-year-old's diet. We have a metabolic health crisis among children with obesity, diabetes, and cardiology issues among kids. The biggest, probably here, right? The biggest building in every city I go to is a brand new children's hospital, right? A brand new pediatric cardiology center. Politicians on both sides of the aisle go to that ribbon cutting ceremony. Why do we have so many pediatric cardiology centers being built? That is not a sign of progress.
No,
that is not a sign of progress. And
it is not.
I'll just say one more
Go ahead, Calley.
On the FDA, and this, this is a sign of optimism. I feel like what's happening in this movement is we have an existential moment, but the message is, and Bobby says this, and I can tell you it's true, this can change so quickly. It is just that the FDA advisory committee that's giving advice on obesity, that people should not be paid by obesity drug makers and telling 6-year-olds that they should be getting lifetime obesity shots. That's what happens. We just need to get the conflicts out of the science and have real, actual, fearless science about why we're getting sick.
Well, this affects Democratic children and Republican children.
These agencies are so utterly captive that they become corrupt to their core. So if there are drugs that come along and actually help people, and they're not patented. In other words, they're patent expired, like hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin, or interventions like stem cells or hyperbaric chambers or chelating drugs, things that are proven through peer review to help people. But the pharmaceutical industry is not making money. They are actually serving the interests of public health. The FDA will try everything in its power to destroy them. The FDA is the enemy of raw milk in this country, and you know what happened to Amos Williams. The health agencies, which are supposed to be serving public and promoting public health, have become instead vessels for promoting and advancing the mercantile and commercial interests of the agencies that they're supposed to, of the industries that they're supposed to be regulating. They have become sock puppets of the industries they regulate.
Well, let me ask you this. The Trump administration took historic actions during the first administration to lower prescription drug prices, to expand access to affordable coverage, deliver hospital and insurer price transparency, to allow Americans to get to trusted doctors. Now, this is going to be a challenge when it starts again. And I don't know what's going to happen if it doesn't start again, but what is the plan? How are you going to impact this when November 5th comes? Well, we 11 days away? Is it 11 days? That's close, folks, 11 days away. And we've got people here like Calley and Bobby who are saying, put me in, coach. I want to do this. I want to make this a priority. And I had the privilege of being Bobby's first interview when he made the announcement that he was going to pursue this with the Trump administration, and the first thing you sat down and talked to me about was, I want to make America healthy again. That's what you said, because you had brokered that deal with Donald J. Trump. What is your plan to make this work once this election is over with?
Yeah, and I'm going to let Calley in a minute talk about the specifics of the plan, because the two of us are working on the transition team, and we're... And Calley has a whole menu of specifics, but what I try to do and what Calley has tried to do is not talk about anything that we have to push through Congress. Because anybody who tells you that they are going to change a law that requires congressional approval is, let me say, they're being over-optimistic. And I, during my campaign, have never made that promise. I've said, if you've got to go to Congress, I'm not going to tell you. I can tell you what I'd like to do. I can't make any promises. What we have figured out, and what both of us have spent a lifetime between us studying, is how to change things through executive order, through policy changes, and through regulatory changes, and personnel changes. And many of the laws are on the books that already require good behavior. It's just that they're being skirted through agency capture. So we're going to change the personnel at the agencies. We're going to fire... We're going to fire on day one, or if you can't fire them, we can ship them to a new HHS headquarters in Guam. Every nutritional scientist at FDA, because all of them are corrupt. And all of them are complicit in the poisoning of our children. NIH has a $42 billion budget, and just for scientific research, and it distributes that budget among 56,000 scientists at universities mainly across the United States. And those scientists have been working on new drugs to treat chronic disease that can be turned into, weaponized by the pharmaceutical industry to serve their profit ambitions. And we're going to go in at day one, and we're going to say we're going to change the focus of this agency, and we're going to find out what is causing the chronic disease epidemic. And we're going to, for 30 years, CDC and NIH have looked at this autism epidemic and say, we don't know we know it's not vaccines. We don't know what's causing it. Well, we're going to find out what's causing it, and we're going to do that in a couple of months. And
Calley, you said this is
put
reversible.
all of these scientists to work, finding out what's causing the obesity epidemic. Is it high fructose corn syrup? Is it all of these other, is it seed oils? And once you have the science out there, and you can tell the truth to the American public, two things happen. One is you give people choice. We're not taking choice away from anybody. If you want to eat Dunkin' Donuts or packaged foods, you should be able to do that. You're an American. But we're going to give you the information. We're going to make them put it on the label. This is going to cause ADHD.
Calley, how fast can this turn around? How fast can you turn this around?
This can turn around very quickly if every single person here sends a message in November, which I believe is one of the most important moments in American history. We need to win states. Hello? We need to win states. We're not expected to win. We need to win the popular vote. We need to send a message, because what that's going to do is it's going to hypercharge the reform agenda that President Trump is talking about, and President Trump, who's bringing together Bobby and Elon and Tulsi to get solutions. I'll get a high-level framework, and the way I look at this, and the reason I'm so optimistic, and it's so important we all get out there and vote, is because what President Trump has done, I think the reason he's the most important figure of our generation politically and societally is because he's tapped into this anxiety, this frustration, this feeling we all have that our institutions aren't quite right, that they're rigged against us. And what Bobby, I think, has done is tapped into what President Trump has been saying for a long time, and adding depth to that there's no greater example of the swamp than what is happening to our kids' health. And it's so core to what President Trump has talked about since the beginning. The American people want to thrive, but there's rigged institutions in the way. So I just want to highlight what Bobby and President Trump has been talking about. This is not about command and control. It's not about overregulation. It's about a belief that all of you want to be healthy. That is what the belief is. And number one, you need correct science. So as Bobby said, why do the NIH and CDC have nonprofits that allow pharma and food companies to directly bribe them hundreds of millions of dollars? Cut those day one. Why are there 23 different divisions of the NIH that are all siloed, that all have corrupt, siloed research on mental health and cardiology? Why don't we put them all together? Why don't we ask and reorient and sign with an executive order Bobby's putting together for President Trump? Let's reorient the NIH to asking one question: why are we getting sick? And let's not worry about embarrassing anyone who's given us previous guidance. I cannot explain to you how important that is. You ask how quickly it can be done. We know why people are getting sick. There's research out there. We need to open source it. We need to analyze it. We need to give people the information. It's not about regulation. Let's get that information out there. Let's figure out what's happening in glyphosate, what that's doing, why something you have to wear a hazmat suit to spray on our crops that's being phased out of every other country, why that FDA says that's safe. Seed oils are being phased out of every other country. We're told that's actually healthier than other animal-based fats. Let's get real research on that. Let's just get the truth, and then you and policymakers can do as they will. The second part of that, and this can also happen very quickly, and this is what President Trump has talked about, the Republican platform, the health language that President Trump steered, said the Republicans support chronic disease reversal policies and benefit flexibility. What does benefit flexibility mean? It means less mandates and more flexibility where you can put your healthcare dollars so you're not jammed a drug down your child's throat, that you can actually have flexibility, maybe experiment more holistic, exercise, food, as long as we have the right information and allow you to do the right decision, the personalized decision with you and your doctor. I think we'll be okay.
Bobby, let me give you we're coming to the end here. Let me give you the final comment. What is it you want people to take away from this meeting and really concentrate on between now and when they cast their votes in this historic election? What is it you want them to really focus on going forward?
You know, I don't know how many of you saw Kamala Harris when she did her interview on The View, where she was asked, is there anything that you would change about the Biden policies? And she said, I can't think of anything. Oh, if you want more of the same, you should go and vote for Kamala Harris. If you want to completely change America, and you know, I've disagreed with President Trump about many things over the decade that he's been in politics. But one thing about President Trump is that he's fearless. And and that's what we need in a political leader today. We need somebody who's willing to go up to challenge orthodoxies, to break institutions that are no longer doing their jobs, to fire people. That's what he's an expert at. You're fired. who are not serving the public interest. And to me, there's been no, in every election, we make this statement that this is the most important election in our lifetime. Well, this is now the most important election in my entire lifetime.
Do we feel that?
And we got to win the state of Pennsylvania. If we win the state of Pennsylvania, we win the country. So we need everybody to get out and vote, and get your friends to vote. And don't let anybody make excuses. Get to the polls early. How many of you are in Pennsylvania? Can you send in the ballot early? All right, how many of you have sent in your ballot? All right, we need all of you to send in your ballot early.
Well, let me say this to everyone that's here. Thank you for coming out, but let me say this to you. These two are fighting a huge institutional legacy. And it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of energy, and it takes them knowing that people are behind them. And if you're behind what they're doing right now, let them know it right now. Let them hear you right now. Come on. Let them hear it. Let them know you're behind them right now. 100%. Let them hear you.